Hello everybody and welcome back to the Ghoul Guides Association, the show where we talk about all things Gothic and pop culture. We are as ever your Ghoul Guides. My name is Lauren.
And I'm Mary.
And today we are doing what I would technically say is one of our deep dives, but it's got a little bit of review content to it as well. Because we are going to be discussing the absolute global phenomenon that is the Traitors.
I'm so excited. If you can't tell already, we are both massive fans of the Traitors. And so a few years ago, we did a talk on pop Gothic where we also kind of touched a little bit on the phenomenon that is the Traitors and also why it's Gothic. So I think we have been wanting to do this kind of deep dive for a while into exactly why, yes, the show The Traitors is Gothic, and also why it's fabulous and amazing, and you should go and watch it if you haven't already. So this is, I think, long overdue.
Very much long overdue. I think we talked about doing this after the first season, but that was when we were like on hiatus and we just had too much shit going on to be able to do it. And then the second season rolled around and we never got round to it. And the problem is as well that the Traitors is like all good game shows. It airs 2 or 3 times a week. So it is quite difficult to like stay. We talked about doing reactions and reviews, and it just, life went too fast to keep up with the Traitors.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also it's one of those shows that sucks you in. And I think for both of us, we were so kind of just into the vortex that is the audience mystery and intrigue in it, that we kind of got so caught up with that we were like before too long it was over, and then we were like then mourning it, the fact that another season has been
absolutely. So if you're not aware of the Traitors, Mary is going to kind of introduce it for us, but I suspect that since at the time of recording this we are almost at the end of the 4th UK season, I wouldn't be surprised if some of you are currently watching the 4th season of the UK edition of the Traitors on the BBC. But Mary, what is this show and why is it such a pop culture phenomenon?
Yes, and I'm glad that you mentioned when we're recording it. So this is currently, we're recording it before the airing of the penultimate episode of the UK season 4, and this will hopefully be published before the final of
hours before the
final. If you are watching before the finale, we hope that this will give you a little bit of a kind of Traitors food for thought before you watch the finale. But obviously if you're watching this afterwards, then oh my gosh, can you believe that happened?
Who could have seen this coming?
I know, right? The twists, the turns, the intrigue, the revenge. Who knew that person would go? Anyway,
I mean, the funny thing about the Traitors is that is probably going to, whatever we just spurted out will be relevant because invariably it will happen.
So I also understand that there might be some people watching or listening to us who are like, I have maybe heard of the Traitors or maybe I haven't, but I'm not quite, what is this? What is this phenomenon? So hopefully this episode will give you a little bit of insight into it. Describe it as a playable Gothic murder mystery. And it's essentially part reality TV show where you go in as a contestant, you go through tasks to win money, and then at the end there is a winner or several winners. So it is in that kind of sense of a reality TV show with money and prizes and that up for grabs. And there is also a social element, which is why what I think makes it so interesting.
Absolutely.
I think the UK version is often consistently rated among the best. We did mention that it is an international phenomenon, and I think a lot of people are surprised, if you have only come into it through the English language versions, that it's originally a show that first aired in the Netherlands. So it was originally created and developed by Mark Poss and Jasper Hugendorn in 2021. And that first season was called De Verraders, which in English is The Traitors. And I think this also kind of sets it up. The first season was hosted by the Dutch presenter and comic Tijl Beckend, and it was shot in Ehrenstein Castle. So I think, again, if you think about when we described it as a playable Gothic murder mystery, that setting of where it takes place, the castle, is so important. And also having a host there to kind of be the lord or lady of this castle, I think also sets a kind of really interesting narrative up. And essentially this first season consisted of 18 contestants, and in the Netherlands this was celebrities. The UK season is quite interesting in that the main Traitors show is not celebrities, and if you have watched any other ones, you'll see that most other countries don't do that at all. They have celebrities in the castle essentially playing the game, and obviously, with an exception of maybe the American Traitors, most celebrities are playing for charity. Or there are like some other countries where the prize pot is quite small, so they are playing for themselves. But it's not like you're winning 100 grand. It's more comparable to like 10 or 20 grand.
I think it's probably quite important to note that, like, apart from a few notable exceptions, Michael Rappaport, most of the people on the American Traitors are game players.
Yeah.
So they are famous because they are from games like Big Brother, Survivor, a couple of, I can't remember all of them, but they are famous. Yeah. Which
below deck
is, I mean, I would argue that those are kind of gameplay to an extent, but like a lot of these people are reality stars, and particularly they will pick reality stars who are known for being really good at these types of reality games. And I do think it adds a really different element to it. But it also, when you watch the UK celebrity Traitors compared to like the US Traitors, where it's like, this is how those people make their money. Like the US celebrity Traitors is, I'm not just here because this is fun or it's going to boost my profile. This is literally, I go on these shows to make my money. Like, I'm not necessarily an actor, I'm not a comedian. Whereas the UK celebrity one is like just a load of national treasures farting in cabins and goofing around and being paranoid.
Yeah. And this is also a really excellent point of what is, okay, so we've talked a lot about games, and this is a game, but what is the actual game? So you have a number of contestants. In the first Netherlands season, it was 18, and 3 of those 18 were secretly selected to be traitors, with the rest of the 18 being the faithful. And while, yes, every day, every episode, you have what is essentially like a task, and that task will be where you work towards the prize pot at the end. So every day you're kind of working to earn money for that end prize pot. You also then have this dual game that is the murder mystery part, where the faithful are trying to work out who are the traitors. And every day you have those tasks, but then you have a round table or a kind of conclave, if the table is
a town
meeting, where the group banish someone who they suspect to be a traitor, and then they reveal their role. Hello, yes, thank you, had a great time, love you all, by the way, I'm a traitor, I'm a faithful. And then in the evening, the traitors all meet secretly in a turret or likewise secret space, and they will choose someone to murder. So it is a game show where normally by 2 players every episode, sometimes it's less, sometimes it's more, but normally 2 players every episode I leave, and you get down to a smaller and smaller number until at the end the team that wins, because it's essentially playing this murder mystery game, the team that wins is the team that has, well, if there's a traitor left, then they win because they're the traitors. But if the faithful manage to banish all of the traitors, then they can split the game. And so the faithful are essentially playing a game of working out who are the people that are traitorous and going against us and murdering our fellow players. And that's the game aspect of it. And I think that it's so interesting that it also, and I'll come to this a bit later, but the setting is so important in that kind of exemplifying that terror part of it, and the atmosphere of paranoia and fear, and who, am I going to go next? And it does become a murder mystery that you are playing in real time. Which brings me to you, Lauren, because I am not a gamer, but I love this show. But I know that you are a gamer, and you also know not only the kind of the game mechanics of it and can explain why they're so interesting and what makes it gothic, but also the games that inspired this social reality show.
Yeah, so the game itself is its own global phenomenon. And the Traitors is actually a slightly more constructed version of a game that you yourself may have played at a house party, at a work retreat, anywhere where people gather. This is the type of game that is played. It starts out in the 1980s. There's a bit of contestation about who creates this game, but it's generally accepted that it was created in 1986, and I'm going to try and get this right, by a guy called Dmitry Davidoff, who was a psychology student at the University of Moscow. And it's significant that Davidoff was a psychology student because within game studies, we have a couple of different strands. We have narratology, which is generally the way that I study games. So whilst I'm not a games scholar, I have worked on games as narrative tech. So I look at, how games, what I have looked at in the past anyway, is how games represent, the figure of the soldier, which, as you probably may expect, even if you're not a gamer, there's quite a lot of games that use Gothic aesthetics that also have soldiers in them. Particularly veteran soldiers, retired soldiers, wounded soldiers. Games are really, really good at manifesting trauma for soldiers because you can literally fight your demons in them. So I would generally say that the work I've done fits more into narratology. But you then also have ludology, and ludology essentially is the study of the play. And this sort of fits into a couple of different brackets. You have the humanities version of it, which is thinking about it as a text, the experience of the play, the art of the play. And then you have the social sciences version of it. And you may or may not know, dear listeners, dear viewers, that a lot of social scientists and business scholars use play as a way to gather data and understand behavior, particularly the idea of in-group and out-group. And Mafia essentially is a game that uses the in-group and out-group concept to kind of play with the idea of human behavior, trust, and so on. So Mafia is one of those games that was kind of created to see how people react to one another, treat one another. When there's suspicion, how do people change? How do people form bonds? And the idea of what we consider to be faithful and what we consider to be traitorous. We know that somebody in the group is a killer, quote unquote. But it's really interesting how people essentially create and form those bonds.
I think this, just to add, actually, for those of you who have been watching the UK season 4 that's currently airing, I think what's really interesting is on that point of the behaviors of traitor and faithful. We have essentially a traitorous faithful, and I think this actually really exemplifies my point, which is that everyone that goes into these games go in with a kind of or at least once the game starts proper, they almost attach a moralistic association to that in-group out-group, where they try and root out traitorous behavior. But I've always maintained that you can just as easily be either a bad faithful or a traitorous faithful, because it's not about those there's nothing actually moral about that. You're literally just on two different teams. But I think this is, to get back to your point, exactly why it's such an interesting game for social sciences.
Yes. And this is one of the reasons that they picked the Mafia as the... Now, I suppose you would call the Mafia the in-group, because they're the ones technically with the control in the game. But the faithful, or the townspeople in this case, kind of perceive themselves as the in-group. So the way the game works, and there's been actually lots of studies done on the fact that the Mafia can only win if there's a certain number of people in the group. So the Traitors, for example, every season will pick a certain number of people, because for the game to have any chance of going either way, so it actually be fairly stacked, you have to have a certain number of people. And it is advised, if you've got 10 people, you pick 2 Mafia and so on and so forth. But essentially the way the game works is there's one game master, or in later versions, God, and you're in a town. So say there's 10 of you, there's 10 townspeople. At the beginning of the game, it's nighttime, and the game master tells everybody to go to sleep. So everybody round the table or in the circle closes their eyes, in some cases puts on blindfolds, and the game master walks around and will tap a certain number of people on the shoulder, and those people are the Mafia. And they will say, Mafia, wake up. The Mafia wake up, they look at each other, they go back to sleep, and then everybody wakes up. Now, in some versions, you have a first day and then you go back to sleep. But generally what happens is the Mafia will pick one person to be murdered. The townspeople wake up and they say, the game master says, in the night, such and such was murdered. And then the townspeople have a certain amount of time to question each other, to try and root it out. And this is also the kind of thing where this game is quite different depending on how it's played. It's often used in team building and in bonding sessions, or in sort of problem solving sessions, because existing bonds or existing tensions will influence the way that the game is played. And the Traitors does play with this. So, you'll often have, well, Charlie's dead, and we all know that Stephen likes to joke around and pick on Charlie, so I think Stephen is the Mafia. And then Stephen will make his case, and, oh, well, you're accusing me because you're the Mafia. The townspeople vote on who they think the Mafia is. They reveal themselves. And if they are wrong, that person is exiled. And as Mary said with the Traitors, if it gets to the point where there is only, say there's 3 people left, and there's 1 townsperson and 2 Mafia, then the Mafia have won. So this is essentially the game. It gained popularity, it went worldwide, particularly because it's the kind of game that could be played without any props, without any elements of, design. And it does have a mathematics side to it. There is definitely a way to play this game. There is a game science to this. But it became very popular with students, very, very popular, as I said, with many games that we use in terms of in-and-out games as a format for research studies. But the reason that they picked the Mafia is because in the 80s, the Mafia and the idea of a mafia, Russian Mafia, an Italian Mafia, an American Mafia, the Mafia was a kind of reasonable thing to be afraid of in the night.
It was also, if you think about the kind of cultural consciousness and popular media, The Godfather was such an iconic film, and it was an easy kind of narrative where you have like these characters and these groups and this aesthetic, and like you say, it also lends itself to that atmosphere of fear Yeah.
Exactly. And you might be thinking, hey, this sounds a little bit like something you guys have talked about before. And that's because this game and the experience of play and the narrative this game creates is very similar to the concept of nighttime or nocturnal ritual fantasy. That there is some external force that threatens the village, that threatens the town, that comes out at night, commits evil deeds, and that binds the townspeople together against the nocturnal evil. So we literally have this game, the center of this game, the heart of this game is that age-old idea that we've talked about before of nocturnal ritual fantasy, that there is something evil happening in the night and that the townspeople must come together and exile those people who they are, who they think might be the perpetrators of that violence to protect themselves. And that's why in the 90s, the game evolved and it took on a new form, which is werewolves. So again, same game rules apply, but instead of the mafia at night, the people of the town, 2 of them, 3 of them, they turn into werewolves and they savage one of the townspeople. And again, it's that even more nocturnal ritual fantasy idea that normal looking people could turn into werewolves in the middle of the night. So the game becomes increasingly popular. In 2001, French game makers actually made a print version of it with cards so that you could minimize the game master. You could sometimes figure out who were the werewolves based on who the game master might pick. And it also introduced elements, so variables had cropped up around the world of things like the seer. So the seer is someone who gets to wake up at night, they point to somebody at the table, and if that person is a werewolf or the mafia, the game master will nod. If they're not, they shake their head. But of course, the seer can't necessarily say, hey, I'm the seer, and that's the werewolf, because then the next night they're going to get murdered. So it's all of these aspects of play. And essentially, what the Traitors has done is taken this format, Mafia Werewolf, which already has been designed to play on in-group and out-group mentalities, to play into the idea of nocturnal ritual fantasy. So I would argue this has always been a Gothic game ever since its inception in the 80s. But what the Traitors has done is made both the play experience and the play design and the narrative experience a Gothic experience. And this is where, for the Gothic, ludology and narratology kind of combine to become one. Because what Gothic games do is use the play experience to force the player into the protagonist of a Gothic novel. So, for example, you're playing a video game, a horror video game, a survival video game perhaps, and there are zombies jumping out at you, and it's the dark and you need to find a torch, and you've only got a certain amount of rations. You might have found, if you are a gamer, that particularly with the advent of the shock controllers and controllers having speakers in them, that video game designers will actually, they'll make it difficult to move forwards. Famously, in the second Last of Us game, the final fight, the controller is very slow, the movement is very delayed. It's physically difficult to complete the fight. So what has happened over the last 10 or 20 years is that game designers have used the physical experience of play to enhance the Gothic experience of the storytelling. So both the play and the narrative are Gothic. And that's what happens with the Traitors. They are placed into a Gothic setting. They're in a castle in Scotland. And I would say every season, actually, the game design becomes more and more and more Gothic. So despite the fact that the players consciously know that their teammates are not being murdered in the night, the fact that the player disappears, that you have these cloaked figures, that you have games. So 2 of the best examples of this is almost every season there is a Buried Alive game, which usually involves one of the players who has been chosen for the murder having to get into their coffin and be buried alive. Now, the player knows that they're not actually going to be buried alive, and the other players know they're not being buried alive, but the players are forced to leave the game before the person who has been quote unquote buried alive is allowed to safely get out of this coffin and leave the game. So, what the game design does is it blurs the lines between fiction and fact. And by adding in things like the traitors being forced to murder in plain sight, by touching a poisoned goblet or putting bloody fingerprints on a picture, stabbing someone's photograph with a dagger, scurrying through their own graves to find shields and gold coins, being locked in cages overnight. The game is consciously kind of breaking down their experience of the play. By the time they get to that round table, their play experience has essentially warped their reality into a Gothic novel. And as Mary mentioned, things like, well, that person, didn't do this, and I thought that wasn't an appropriate response. The behaviors that people come to consider as being in-group behaviors, they also forget the fact that the traitors want to win as much money as possible. Because if the traitors are the last ones standing, they take all of the money, whereas the faithful have to split it between them. So what's really fascinating about this is that you have this almost triple fold to it. You have the players experiencing the actual game of trying to figure out who the traitors are. Then you have the daily tasks, which are enhancing the Gothic experience, making them feel further and further from reality. And we know that the Gothic loves to make people feel detached from reality. There is something to be said for the experience of setting fire to a shield with your name on it that is in front of a great Wicker Man looking beast. Like that, despite the fact this is a game and nothing is going to happen to you, really, the fear and the tension and the distrust that starts to grow is very real. And then you have the third layer, which is the final consumer. Us watching at home, having a Gothic experience ourselves of watching, because there's also always something that we, the audience, don't know. A hidden connection between multiple players, something that we're not going to be told, the way that editing works. So it's this really fascinating example of how games and game design and gameplay adds this new layer to the Gothic experience. And that really, I've always loved werewolves. It was one of my favorite drinking games to play, like as a student. I find it really entertaining. I always loved to be the werewolf because I usually win, because I just sit there and let everybody else. That's not a brag. Like, I think it sometimes I think people are like, it troubles me that you win this game. But I think it's that very universal experience of how setting and narrative construction alters the way we experience it. And it manages to recreate that experience of playing a video game that, sounds are coming from your controller, the lights are flashing on and on, your controller shakes really suddenly. It's replicating that experience where it forces you to have that one more layer of connection than you get when you're reading a novel or even watching a film, because there's a layer of sensory involvement that you just don't get in that kind of thing. And I think the closest thing I could compare it to otherwise is something like the Haunted Mansion at Disneyland, or one of those kind of experiential rides where, there's smoke billowing out and cold air and all of that type of thing. And it manages to overcome your rational senses. And that's why it's also the kind of game that's really valuable for sociologists and for psychologists, because it gives people a really good insight into how and why we make the decisions that we make. And I think, Mary, I think we talk about this a lot, that it really goes to show you how people's unconscious minds work. And there was a really great incident this season that I won't spoil because some of you might go and watch the season after listening to this episode. But there's a really fantastic example where somebody who has it correct, they have it correct, they figured it out. But because they behave in a way that is not seen to be a good in-group behavior, they are exiled from the group.
I think this kind of thing happens so much to the point that now I'm like, the people that are going into the show and being contestants will have at least seen one season, and a lot of them say that they are fans of the show. And I don't, for me personally, I'm like, well, haven't you worked out then that there's actually very little evidence that you can have? And most people, when they're at the round table, what they're saying, it isn't evidence, which again, it's like a Gothic novel, because so much Gothic narratives, they're about, presenting something as if it were a case, or as if it, when we think about like found documents, or the strange case of Dr. Jekyll and Hyde, all those kinds of things. But that there's so little evidence. And what happens for the most part is that people internalize their own biases, or they go through confirmation bias, where they think someone is guilty, and therefore everything that person does just makes them look more and more guilty. And I won't spoil it, but that one of my favorite kind of examples of this in one of the UK seasons, and I think it's season 2, it is it's a player who is a doctor. And at one morning, so they have breakfast, and everyone comes in, and then one person obviously doesn't come in, and and that's the person who's been murdered. And this person stands up and gives a toast. Lovely, touching, really nice moment. Some people around the group, genuinely, and I find that suspicious. And then soon enough, that person finds himself under suspicion. And also what I have noticed is that in this UK season especially, a lot of people are hiding their jobs and their employment, as if that kind of suggests one way or another, and it doesn't. That same individual was a doctor. And again, that same group of people were like, and I find that suspicious. Like, what? Why?
Yeah.
And in the same way I think
also...
I was just the other side of that is while you can read into, this person's an actor, so therefore they must be good at lying, and so therefore they must be a traitor. I think then some people internalize their own jobs, like I am. And this isn't about the current UK season. This happens in every single season that I've seen with someone from law enforcement in them, where they say, I'm a police officer, I'm a detective, I work, that therefore I'm good at detecting. And for the most part, in this kind of game, no. If I was in one of these shows and someone said, I'm a detective, I'd be like, great, I'm discounting everything that you're saying, because I've seen so many of these shows and you're never right.
Yeah, so this is what's really interesting, because this is where the game theory of it all comes into it, and the way that the setting of the game transports the players to the experience of the game. And the difference, of course, is that the traitors aren't criminals. The traitors are not psychopaths. The traitors don't have sociopathic tendencies. The traitors are not criminally minded people. They are people who Claudia Winkleman has chosen in the case of the UK one. And we must say that Claudia adds to the game experience so considerably. But the experience of the faithful players is that they then revert to stocks and stereotypes and conventions. So they create the traitors in their minds. And this is why for, like I said, sociologists, psychologists, business studies, these types of games are so interesting, because not only does it reveal people's unconscious biases, particularly in the UK one. I mean, we won't go too deeply into the fact that it's always
I think
people of colour get this the first.
I think we should mention racial bias, as well as the fact that individuals who are gay also come under a lot of suspicion. So contestants of colour, contestants who are gay, and also neurodivergent people, often, because their behavior or their just identity is kind of outside of the normative, there's something there, whatever it is, that other people think, well, that's different, so therefore that is suspicious. And I think that is a problem.
Some commentators have said that it's obviously it's not great that it happens, but it's actually really valuable, because these aren't people that are engaging in consciously ableist, homophobic, or racist behaviors. But what seeing this on a national show does is demonstrate to us the depth of our unconscious biases, and that we can think of ourselves as compassionate and progressive as we want to. But when we're in a situation where we are told to be suspicious, we immediately pick out the
Yes.
non-normative individuals in terms of the UK, a predominantly white, middle class, British values, whatever it might be. And yeah, generally those players who are autistic or ADHD get suspicion midway through. It's almost always a person of color who's voted out first. But again, the game is constructed in such a way that it forces people to doubt themselves. And when people doubt themselves, they often revert back to those unconscious biases. And I'm sure, I don't want to speak for my colleagues in the social sciences, but this is why this is such a valuable way of like doing research, is because these games really expose people. And what's really fascinating is the way that the in-group plays the game versus the way the out-group plays the game. So if in this case we consider the traitors to be the out-group, the traitors identify with the in-group. So the traitors perceive themselves as members of the in-group who have been chosen by the rules of the game to behave as the out-group. And generally the ones who want to be in the out-group are the ones that get found out really quickly because they think they're really smart and they tend to get voted out really fast and found out. Whereas the in-group, the faithful, see the traitors as these, and Claudia in particular and the other hosts of the other shows play this up. They say things like, the traitors are laughing at you, the traitors will be sleeping well tonight, you've let the traitors do it again. And the faithful start to bring up this paranoia and this idea that despite the fact at the beginning, they all sit there and most of them say they'd like to be a traitor because it seems like the more fun way of playing the game. Within a few days, the morality shifts and it's almost like that separation from reality. And I think that's why every season they go harder and harder and harder on the Gothic aesthetics. Particularly this fourth season of the UK one. Is incredibly Gothic.
I've so enjoyed the tasks. I normally sometimes, especially in the UK one, so the UK seasons 1 to 3, I think there are some tasks that I absolutely love. I think they're aesthetically or narratively really interesting, and I think I really like the ones where they kind of play mind games. So,
Yes.
the funeral one, or like
the funeral one,
or where it's like the traitors
is always a really
the traitors have given these answers, you have to find them. But I think sometimes there was in the UK one especially a tendency to go for big budget physical tasks, which I find quite boring, but just me personally.
I don't care about you dropping a bag of gold while you're skydiving. It's not interesting to me.
But I think this season has done every single task. It has been Gothic and leaning into that kind of either the paranoia side of things or the fear side of things, or just creating a general sense of like, terror and horror, which I personally find enjoying. So yeah, I think the tasks do add so much, and it is, like you say, just adding to that atmosphere that then influences how these individuals are playing the game.
Yeah, and there's really a level to this where I think you can tell the point where they start to forget that this is a game, and 2, this is a TV show. Less so with the celebrity version of the UK traitors. These are all very highly media trained people, but I think the thing that makes the UK one and the other versions where it is quote unquote normal people is that it is people who have no real kind of experience of anything on that scale. And because it's not the type of reality show where there's any production or constructed narratives, they have their diary scenes and that's about it really. Otherwise it is just them as a group. what's really fascinating is the way that people adjust and the way that people then behave. And actually, people who think they're good at playing games tend to do the worst on this show. The person who is currently succeeding in this season, as we were laughing, because I'm also a communications officer, is a communications officer. And it really, really demonstrates that it's less about gameplay and more about people.
Well, I
And
think
people play.
that's the thing. It's a social reality game show.
Yes.
And I think a lot of people either going into it or playing it or discussing it forget about that social side of things. It's so important.
The thing that I really love as well is, and this is the thing that I found fascinating from the start, is because the tactic I always took when I played Werewolves or Mafia without the cards was, okay, this person's the GM. Who are they going to pick? And I would use my knowledge of the social connections between those people to basically cheat the game. And what I really love about the Traitors is that they are still thinking, oh, well, Claudia will have picked them, or Alan will have picked them, or whoever it is will have picked them, because they are a detective, a barrister, a master game player, you know, because they're a PhD student, because they're, you know, whatever it may be. And they every season do specifically pick a couple of people with jobs that you would think would make them very good at this game. But the reality is that just draws more suspicion to you. And Claudia she maybe picks one of them, but she almost never picks all of them, because why would you? Because they're the first people that are going to be suspicious. And I think my thinking would be, well, would Claudia have chosen them because of that or not? And they kind of forget it. And I think it's like I was saying about the experience of the game makes them forget that they all sat at that round table at the beginning and were tapped on the shoulder. They all forget almost that there was a construction, that they all sat in that interview and gave that information. And it's almost like they get to the point where they almost feel like and behave like the traitors chose themselves. The traitors turned up as traitors. And they'll say things like, you're not the person I met on the train, and X, Y, and Z. And you can really see as well how that separation from reality and they are fully immersed in this game. And it always reminds me of, so my cousins once did this game where basically it's a zombie survival game. And you're driven out to a abandoned, rundown hospital in the middle of nowhere. And when you get there, you're told, right, you've got to go in, you've got to do this. And it's pitch black. You go in with these, like, you know, paint gun type things. And the zombies, you know, I would absolutely crap my pants. You know, they're doing things like hiding behind a door, like in the rundown toilet of this abandoned, like, hospital. And they said that even though they consciously in the back of their minds knew it was a game, the fear that they felt was very, very real. And I think it translates over, even though there's that less horror aspect of it, it is more a gothic play experience. The social experience of being in the game, they do forget all of those other things, and they do have that real genuine sense of terror and being picked off in the night.
Yeah, because it's not, imagine leaving something and not getting to say goodbye to the people that you spent a few days with or a couple of weeks with, and then similarly getting banished. It's not very nice, you know, to be picked and said, I think, you know, by the majority or the plurality of people,
yes,
we think you are a traitor. Because by that point, especially, it's like, it's nobody wants to say that.
It's probably, before we talk about like your favorite of the seasons, I think that is one thing we haven't really mentioned about the gameplay, is that for a lot of people, it was really interesting this season. One of the players said it's like being back at school, because he was picked last for a task because everyone suspected he was a traitor. And that moralistic aspect of like the faithful are good and the traitors are evil, and the traitors are trying to steal the money for the faithful. And, you know, despite the fact you've all willingly signed up to be in this game, what's really fascinating, and again, not to keep banging on, but this is why gameplay works so well. Because if you survey people and you say, hey, would this work? Would you do this? Would you do that? People would say, oh, no, I wouldn't do that. If you put people in a game situation, particularly in a group game, one of my favorite experiments is, and they actually did this on the second season of the Uncanny TV show, I think it was. So there's an experiment where there's 12 people, and they all they think they're waiting for something, and within the 12 people there's 2 actors. They come in, they sit on the chairs, and after a few minutes one of the actors stands up and then the other actor stands up, and most people will stand up because they don't want to be the person that's not standing up. And you see it like with the round table, they will come in like, I think it's Jade's definitely a traitor. And then everyone sits down and they're like, it's Reese. And the person that was adamant it's Jade is like, yes, I've also voted for Reese. Yeah. Because that group mentality and the in-group identity and not wanting to be seen as different from the in-group makes people go against their ration and their reason. And you can see they're like, why did I do that? Like after the person stood there and said, no, I'm a faithful, you see them all kind of go, why did I do that?
It's so easy to say that when you have the information that this person is or isn't a traitor. And I think people need to remember that, you know, especially if you are playing as a faithful, you don't have all the information, and therefore you're not making, you can never make, there's very few instances where you can make a kind of choice like that based on sound evidence, because there's not really there is instances of evidence in the game that points to certain people, not incontrovertible, but there are some instances of evidence, but most people don't focus on that.
And what's really fascinating is where there are instances of evidence. For example, in the 4th season, the family tree portrait. So the game will manufacture a couple of situations where the traitors must do something that could draw suspicion to them or could get them caught. Because otherwise, there's almost no way to identify who might be a traitor. You have no real way of knowing, and it is more of just a social game in that respect. But obviously, because it's a game for viewers, what the game does is they engineer a couple of times in the season where they either have to murder in plain sight, as they call it, or they have to do something to add money to the pot, or they have to pick a certain number of players to have something happen. And the dilemma is, do we put ourselves in that or do we not put ourselves in that? And they're going backwards and forwards on what makes them look more guilty. And that is constructed to give people more evidence. What's really fascinating is there's only ever a couple of players who actually take that evidence up. Yeah. And fascinatingly, they're often the players who are not very outspoken, don't have much sway. They're usually the players that don't have the social capital. Yeah. And they're sitting there going, well, you were in the cage and you voted for that person and you did that. And it's very difficult for those players to convince the other players. And people will be drawn towards their social instincts rather than, oh, well, I saw you near that picture, or you were in the cage, or you voted for this person. Because we tend to trust our social instincts over our logical instincts because we go on impulse. And I think that's something, maybe this is also two autistic women. We love watching people. We love watching reality TV for this exact reason.
Well, yeah, and that's actually a good way to maybe segue into some of my favorite international versions, because one thing that I really love about this show is that it is the repetition that you have of the same concept. There's a group, 16 to 20-ish people who go in. Some people are chosen to be on one team, the traitors. Some people are chosen to be on the other team, the faithful. And then, you know, then the game starts and that kind of thing. And little kind of mechanics will change here and there, but that's essentially what happens every single time. So you have this standard foundation of this Gothic murder mystery, but what changes is the people. And I have seen lots of different versions.
Mary
of
is the number one Traitors fan.
I wouldn't go that far because there's still lots of lots of shows, lots of versions that I haven't seen. I've lost count how many versions there are. I think it might be up to 30 now, as in different
God, that's
countries
great.
who are doing, or if it's not over 30 yet, then it's very close to it. I think last year there was a season in India which I haven't seen yet. Obviously we've mentioned like the American and the Canadian version is also really great. There's also a French Canadian version which I haven't seen. The Canadian version is very, very good. I've seen a lot of people, I'm not going to go into detail about it, but the Australian version, there's currently 2 seasons of it. I think is excellent. I really enjoyed season 1 and season 2. If you want to be really, really frustrated when you watch a season, and be so irritated by not just the traitor/traitors, but by everyone else who is just literally, it gets to a point where the host is like, maybe you need to look elsewhere. And still, anyway, but it's so good as a hate watch. Definitely go and watch the Australian version if you haven't. And all across Europe, there's seasons. I think there's one in Mexico that's in development. But what I find really interesting is that watching it, you get a kind of real glimpse into different countries and nationalities.
Oh my God, absolutely.
But with that same kind of foundation and the Gothic aesthetic.
Yes. If you want to better understand British culture and what British people are really like, and I say British because they do try and pick people from all across the UK, but genuinely I think it is the most honest, unproduced version of Britishness in recent pop culture.
I think definitely watching it, you get a sense for which countries like speak in code, and like what, like in Britain, what you say is kind of like hedged around a load of pleasantries. Some countries, people are more direct and they will go and find people, address them, say I'm suspicious of them, and then that will happen at the round table. Other people, it's like, I think Canada season 1, genuinely I had no idea what way any of the round tables were going to go, just because it was really interesting. But I thought I would do, these are my 3 favorite international seasons, non-English language seasons, just because I know that most people watching this will probably have seen the UK version. If you haven't, go and watch it because it is one of the best. And you might have seen some of the other English language ones, but these are some of my favorites of the other ones that I have watched. So I'm going to start with Norway. And I have to say, the Norwegian Traitors is probably my favourite. It's called Verrader. And we have the Traitors and the Loyal. So they're called like loyals. In this, the Norwegian Traitors is the 5th international version of the show. And as of recording this episode, there have been 5 seasons that have aired, and there's another 6 in production.
So it's one of the earliest ones.
One of the earliest ones, and it's so good. The show is hosted by Mads Hansen. Lauren, are you familiar with Mads Hansen?
Yes, kind of.
Yeah, Mads Hansen is a former professional football player, and you might be thinking, especially if you're used to Claudia, like, okay, so a footballer, but he's so great because he's so chill, and he just goes there and he's like, right, okay, so this is what we're doing today. And
I'm fairly sure that Mads Hansen did commentary work. Not to brag, but I think my dad knows it.
Yeah. Amazing. Mads is one of my favorite Traitors hosts. I think he's great and fabulous, and as I'll get into in my other examples, I think the hosts really do bring a lot to the narrative that they're kind of portraying. Seasons 1, 3, 4 and 5 were filmed primarily at a place called Midthasen, which is a historic villa and an estate in Norway, which was built in the 1930s, and it's gorgeous, and it has that whole kind of, it's not quite a castle, but it's kind of Viking-esque a little bit, and it's got beautiful views of Norway. So it is a Nordic villa. The second season, which I'm just gonna pause here and just talk about the second season because it's one of my favorite seasons of it, and it needs its own kind of like little thing. The second season was filmed at Kongsvinger Fortress, which was basically built in this place, which is on a route connecting North and South Norway. And it was historically like a really important place. People would go on pilgrimages in Norway to go and see St. Olaf. It was also really important in terms of trade, both between the North and the South and in other countries, and also as a military position. It was incredibly important. And so, yes, this is a kind of former military fortress. And I think that
Love that.
has its own kind of, influence on that particular season. And where you have not just this kind of gameplay and strategy, but then also this military kind of place that they're all staying at. And season 2, season 2 of the Norwegian Traitors is the only season that I have seen that has done this. I'm not saying there aren't other seasons that have done this, but I haven't seen it, where there are 16 contestants in total and everyone enters as a pair. So there's 8 pairs. You're all connected. So some people that, this is my mother, or this is my, we're married, or this is my friend, or we work together. Obviously, as with most of the Traitors, these are Norwegian celebrities. So, it might be like TV presenters or actors or sports people, but that everyone has a connection. And the first task is really interesting, where you have to try and guess who's connected to who. And watching the UK, like this current UK series, I was like, are we going to do that? Is everyone going to have a connection? Because it works so well, especially once the traitors are chosen, because everyone knows that everyone is connected to everyone else. But within your pair, you don't know if your partner is a traitor or a faithful or a loyal. And I think it just adds another dynamic that I wish this British season had done. I think
we should clarify that this season there is a big conspiracy theory that may or may not be true. People have noticed that there's two sealed envelopes on Traitors Uncloaked, and they only ever open one of them. We know that at least 2 sets of players are connected. There was a mother and daughter and a boyfriend and girlfriend. No, it's not the first time that's happened. We had a boyfriend and girlfriend in the first season. We had mother and son in the second season. So sisters in the third season. I forgot because she went out so quickly. So we know that there's usually a connected set. But essentially on the first day when they got to the castle, one of the first things we were shown was this family tree with some Latin that has a very ominous kind of motto about being suspicious and who do you trust. So viewers have had, and this is why I kind of said the third layer of the Gothicness is the viewers, because you have that thing of familiarity, but every season they do something slightly different so that the players can't predict based on what happened in the last one, but also there's something new for the viewers. But there's basically this theory that all of the players have a connection to one other player at least. It's definitely more connections than we've had in a UK series so far, but people think that there's this secret connection. And I suppose my perspective is maybe from the gameplay that Britishness and the way that British people behave, the choice to leaving it to the players to not reveal that or choose to reveal that. I think the way that British people behave, having it kept a secret is probably more, it influences people's behavior more, because it's like, well, do you try and keep your other person in without being suspicious? If you're wanting to try and win the money together type thing.
I am definitely guilty of perhaps wanting that conspiracy theory about the secret connections to be true. And I think maybe because I had seen this season 2 of the Norwegian Traitors and it worked so well, but I think it's more interesting when then it's not a secret. And I think having, we have, as of this recording, there's 2 episodes to go. The secrets in terms of relationships or people that have kept their careers secret, other than maybe the individual who did reveal their profession in a very dramatic and satisfying way, it's not really added anything. And if anything, I think that it's maybe kept people a bit muted in how they're playing. where I think if you want that kind of season where everyone is connected and how that works, and seeing people vote out their friends or their family, or that kind of having that suspicion, but it's out in the open, but also, then the Norwegian one is season 2, watch it. And then just as a general
I do wonder if they thought people would reveal it, like because apart from Ross and his mum's name, I can't remember,
Diana.
Most people have ended up being like, well, I know they're not a traitor because that's my girlfriend.
Yes.
Like, they haven't actually like properly revealed it. And I wonder if, again, that's just the Britishness of it all.
But then let's have a season where everyone is connected, but have it out in the open, and let's see what that addition does to the narrative.
So Norway season 2.
Norway season 2, it's excellent. And then just in general, the Norwegian seasons. So Norwegian is a really great socialist capitalist society where they don't necessarily need a lot of money, because most things that you need are available for free because they have great healthcare and education and employment rights. So the money in the Norwegian season isn't like, as kind of, not, I was going to say impressive. That's not what I mean. It's the amount isn't as big. The prize pot isn't as big, but I actually think that makes it better. And I also think in terms of the show and the tasks that they do, you can tell that the budget isn't as big, but it has, in my opinion, some of the best games because they're all about mind manipulation. And I love those ones where it's all about, the tasks are designed to make you think about who is lying to you. And sometimes some of the tasks require you, whatever your role is in the game as a traitor or a faithful, to lie to someone in that game. So one thing that they do quite frequently is they'll have, everyone will be at dinner and then everyone will be served the same dish, but there will be 3 people out of everyone who the dish will be horrible. So it might be like full of curry or like really, really hot. And you have to try and pretend to everyone else that what you're consuming, what you're consuming is really lovely and tasty. And then it's kind of, everyone has to work out who they think. And I love those kinds of games. They have another one where it's kind of like, we're going to show you, one person kind of gets on a stage, we're going to show you a kind of object, and the objects can be really random, and then we're going to give you a sign, either tell the truth about the object that you're looking at or lie about the object that you're looking at, and then you have to describe the object to everyone else, and everyone else has to try and work out if you're lying or telling the truth. And I think those are so interesting because it gets through the whole like moralistic idea of who is a, those kinds of faithful are moralistically good and those kinds of things, but it also just twists the knife in even more, which I love. So Norway for me, gold standard. And as a final point to get people interested in this, anyone that has watched Britain's Got Talent, there was a season a few years ago where a Norwegian individual won. It was Viggo Venn, who is a Norwegian comic, and he basically was the guy that got on stage and took loads of high-vis jackets off. I don't know if you're familiar with this, Lauren, maybe not.
But remember it from like a pop culture moment.
Yes. He's in the Norwegian Traitors season 3. So that's just another thing to kind of, get you into watching.
Another pop culture moment.
Another pop culture moment. Moving on, the second version that I want to recommend is the French Traitors, which is called Les Traitors, with a subtitle Seront-ils des masques, which translates to Will They Be Unmasked, which I think immediately just adds another kind of layer of intrigue to it. I have written down the wrong number of the international version, but I can tell you that it's been going for quite a while, and as of recording, 5 seasons have aired. There's a 6th one that's in production, and there's also a spin-off show called Nouvelle Generation, or New Generation, which is a special edition of the show specifically for YouTubers, influencers, and content creators.
Oh, cool.
I haven't watched this one because I was like, no, I don't like too much change.
Well, I'm really not surprised that one of the best versions is the French one, because Werewolves is fucking massive in France. Like,
yes,
it was 2 French game designers who basically codified Werewolves and published it. I think it's called the Werewolves on Miller's Hill or something.
Yeah.
And Werewolves as a game is hugely popular in France and has had like, they've made like a film version of the game and things like that. So I feel like as a cultural capital, like France is heavily invested in this concept. So I'm actually, now I think about it, not surprised that the French version is one of the best versions.
It's honestly so good. So obviously we have Claudia Winkleman. She is our kind of OG host, and she is fabulous, fantastic. Her outfits, British and
you don't know
her hair, like just and her passion for the game, like.
Just to say, if you're international and you've never seen Claudia Winkleman before, and you start watching this show and you're like, what the fuck? Claudia's whole thing is that she is incredibly fake tanned and has this awful black eyeliner and black fringe. And it started out as like a bit. She was a sort of like, I think a lot of places do this, but we have it really quite prominently in British pop culture. We have what we call like comedy personalities. So they're not necessarily comedians, but they'll be sort of like interviewers, and they'll go on game shows and things like that. And they're not stand-up comics, but they are personalities who are intentionally created to be funny. And Claudia is a sort of caricature of herself. She's always been like the weird one, but she presents that like celebrity she does Strictly Come Dancing. She is one of our greatest national treasures, and her whole thing was she was the funky little weirdo. So if you start watching British Traitors and you're like, why is this woman orange? And why is her eye makeup so bad? That's the point, and we love it. And every year, everyone dresses, like lots of people dress up as Claudia for Halloween.
And she's so fabulous. And I think one of her whole things is she gets so into the game, and it is really delightful to watch. Then at the other extreme, we have Mads Hansen, who is so chill and always a little bit bemused. In France, their Traitors host is a magician and comic called Eric Antoine. And I think that he brings that kind of like cheekiness to it, which is so delightful to watch. He's like always a little bit playful, and his introductions and his kind of monologues are just fabulous and funny. And then each season takes place not just at one castle, but at a different castle. So not only when you watch the show are you like, who's going to be in it? Again, it's French celebrities, and what are going to be the twists and the turns, but also where's it going to be set? And the program's artistic producer, Matthew Chalvignac, has said that each castle production that production chooses is intended to convey a specific atmosphere, and the season is then designed around the selected castle. So season 1 takes place at the Chateau de Beauvoir, which was chosen for its Agatha Christie-like mystery novel vibes. So amazing. Gorgeous. Season 2 takes place at the Chateau de Val. And season 3 takes place at Chateau de Biron, which was chosen for its gloomy settings and history as the home of the Duke of Biron, who is known as one of France's first traitors. So they're really leaning into their own history. And then season 4 and season 5 take place at the same castle, which is the Chateau de Bournel. But I think that watching it, I would love for there to be like a kind of Traitors. Sorry, that is my cat. Everyone, apologies, but my cat's very excited about this.
Star also loves the Traitors.
He does love the Traitors. We're gonna push on though, because I think that it is. I would love there to be a kind of European or like international Traitors tour where you just go to these gorgeous locations. And this is something that I think is really fabulous about watching different versions of the show, because you get to see the different kind of spooky and gothic settings of each country, and it's great. And yeah, like I think the French is so good. I don't want to spoil too much, but what I will say is that in one season there is a gay married couple that go in. I think they're married, and they I'm not going to say if one of them gets picked to be a traitor or not, but after the traitor selection, one of them goes to their partner, I know you're a traitor, and I know that you're going to recruit tonight, because that had been explained to them, and so you're going to choose me, or if not, I'm going to go to the group and tell everyone that you're a traitor. And it just, stuff like that happens so much, and it's like you watch it and you're like, oh, it's just, yeah, and the setting's great, the tasks are great, and it's yeah. So the French one, I think, definitely watch. It's very, very entertaining. And then finally is one that I actually recently watched. It's the 26th international version of the show, and its first season aired in 2025. So it is one of the baby seasons. That is the Italian Traitors, which you would think, okay, yeah, you would,
cameo.
But yeah, you would, I guess, expect that the Italian Traitors would be one of the best, maybe, with its, you know, its, I guess, history of, I mean, even just in literature, you know.
I was going to say, in terms of the Gothic, like, Italy is always presented in, particularly the British Gothic, as being this place of, like, unbridled passions, and there's a reason, I will not go into it right now, but basically there's a reason why the Gothic moves to Italy after a certain point. So a lot of the early Gothic is set in France. We have quite a bit of Gothic in Germany, and then around about the late 1790s we get a shit ton of Gothic in Italy. And it's because Britain had this very specific imagination of Italy, partially because Italy was principalities, lots of different warring parties, you know, the history of the Guelphs and the Ghibellines, and there was this idea that, you know, the Italians had like hot blood, and that it was this place where they were super religious but also super lustful, and you know, wanted power, and they had condottieri, and the Gothic has always painted Italy in this very like over the top light.
So I think, and this is what's really interesting about watching lots of seasons, I think that yes, Italy has that reputation, but I think it's all rooted in Italians just being direct.
Yeah.
Because this season, obviously I've only seen one season, so I don't want to generalize too much, but the participants of this season were very happy and open about saying, I think you're a traitor, I'm suspicious of you, which you don't always get to see, especially in something like the British one, where people maybe hold,
not in the British one,
no, where you know, you hold everything to your chest. So this is very, I think,
in that kind, British one, I think you're a traitor is like saying, I think you'd take a puppy outside and shoot it.
I know, yeah. But this is great. This is great. And the host is Alicia Marcuzzi, who is an Italian presenter, actor, and model, and she very much plays up into the whole, you guys are rubbish and the traitors are winning. And every time there is a murder, she comes to breakfast and she takes the picture off the wall and throws it down the stairs. And it's great. I love it. And I love her. The show was filmed at two locations, Castel Valle and also Castel Nano. And I think originally one of the castles, the kind of local government didn't want them to film there, but then the Italian government and politicians were like, no, wait, because this is going to really boost tourism. So I'm saying that because if you want to go to these places, they look gorgeous, and again, they're castles, so they're very much kind of feeding into that Gothic vibe and that Gothic narrative.
If you want to see what you think Udolpho might have looked like.
Exactly. And I just want to end on one of the Italian missions, which is the penultimate mission, and it was called The Enigma of the Broken Heart. Because I think, again, this is how I get interested in the tasks. I'm not interested in how, walking across something really high or doing some kind of physical feat. What I'm interested in is the spooky stories. And essentially, the contestants that were left were told about these two lovers that used to live in the castle, but the woman, her father didn't want her to marry her lover, and so they didn't get married, and they essentially died, and now their ghosts haunt the castle, and they're trying to reunite in the afterlife. And what all the contestants have to do is find two halves of a locket and put them together to reunite the ghosts. Love that kind of frame narrative.
That's
excellent.
Brilliant.
And then essentially what the contestants have to do is they're thrown into a room that becomes like a kind of escape room where they have to solve certain things and work something out.
Yeah.
But it's spooky and stuff is going on, and then halfway through, two of the contestants have to lock themselves together like the two lovers were, go through a secret underground passageway which is full of cobwebs into another room which is completely dark. They have to listen to the other contestants in the other room telling them, firstly, where the light switch is. One of them is like feeling around on a bed, and we can see, because it's shot in kind of night vision, that there is definitely someone lying on that bed. And I won't say any more than that, but it definitely leans into the whole kind of like spooks and scares and everything. And it just makes it really, really fabulous to watch these people getting freaked out. And I guess that's a little bit mean of me, but those are also the tasks that I enjoy.
That you enjoy the most.
So this is why I think the Traitors is Gothic. Hopefully you will agree with us that both the playable side of it is Gothic, and also the aesthetics and the setting and the narrative are also Gothic. And hopefully if you haven't watched the Traitors before, or if you have only watched maybe one or two versions, this will kind of inspire you to watch it or to watch more. And yeah, like I'd also really love to hear if you have any recommendations of other versions of the show that I should watch, or just let me know if you have seen any others and if you have any favorites. And also no spoilers, please, in the comments.
Yes. And because this will come out just before, we can't believe that person won.
Oh my gosh. Honestly, it's shocking.
To be fair, this is actually, I don't know who's, I will say now, I was pretty sure I thought I knew, and after last night's episode, I really don't know who's going to make it to the end now.
Yeah.
So we will see. But of course, that is our episode. So thank you for joining us. We hope to see you soon for more deep dives and more reviews. Thank you, Mary, for those recommendations. You will find them on a variety of streaming platforms. Quite a lot are on the BBC iPlayer if you're in the UK.
And thank you, Lauren, for such a thorough kind of deep dive into Gothic gameplay.
I love talking about games. And I should do it more, but, we'll see. All right, well, as ever, lovely members of the Ghoul Guide Association, stay safe and stay spooky.
Stay safe and stay spooky.